Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Women Wednesdays. So happy to have all of you with us virtually and in person at Domi Station today. Woohoo! Yay! If you are joining us virtually, please make sure you share your questions and comments. Let us know where you're watching from and that you're joining us today. And also feel free to share this with your friends, your gal pals, and family if they want to take a few minutes to learn about our guest speaker today. So without further ado, I'm Chrissy Souders, and I'm going to send things over to our founder, Barbara Westcott.
Okay, or to Barbara Westcott. That's great. Hi, everybody. My name is Barbara Westcott. I'm the founder of Women Wednesdays. So what is Women Wednesdays? It's about building a collaborative community of women who help each other succeed. That's really going to become relevant when we talk to our guest today in her book about why you need a team, why you need partners, why you need those special people that are going to be part of your entrepreneurial journey. So if you want to get involved with Women Wednesdays, just go to womenwednesdays.com. We have a series of programs, whether it's our speaker series, Women Words, Tech Squad, internships. I mean, we just have a variety of programs to help women connect and collaborate. But then we also have community campaigns, and that's about changing our communities for the better, to make them work for everyone. And so some of our campaigns, we have women doing business, women-owned businesses. We have a new program called Trades Work, and that's about increasing women in the skilled trades, which are high-paying, very stable jobs, totally in demand. Women make up less than 3% of the workforce. We can totally change that. We have our #1 City for Women talent program. We're going to meet all those criteria that you need to make a city a top city for women. And lastly, in the fall, we will be launching a campaign called Drive Forward with Google Drive. And that's about teaching a lot of women how to use Google Drive and why it matters. So let me just hand it over to Tamara real quick. And Tamara, please introduce yourself, and then maybe you can help us introduce some of our other Women Wednesdays team members that are here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamara Smith. I'm one of the co-hosts here on Women Wednesdays. And if you were with us last week in person for the Trades Work launch, oh my goodness, it was such a great time. You can go back and see that video and any of our shows on the Women Wednesdays page. You can share them, you can comment and keep the conversation going. So we hope you'll do all of those things. But it takes a team to make this thing work. So we are going to talk a little bit about some of our Women Wednesdays team members. And we have Olivia Alford on the screen with Barbara. Over at Domi Station, we also, I think back there, I see Robin Yateman.
Yeah, and Jackie, let's let Robin say a few words, and then Jackie. If
I see Jackie.
Put over and you say hello to Jackie too.
So our Women Wednesdays team is in person for the most part together at Domi Station. Olivia, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I am Olivia Alford. I am the speaker series coordinator, and I also own 38 Expressions. It's a written media company, so I do ghostwriting, writing, copywriting, copy editing, all of that good stuff, social media management, and website building. So that's basically what I do.
But then as Women Wednesday Speaker Series coordinator, she helps put this whole speaker series together. And she's going to be doing more and more and more with that. And so tomorrow it might be a little hard for you to see, so I'll just say we have Robin right here, Robin Yateman. Go ahead, Robin. Robin's our membership coordinator.
Hi, I'm Robin.
Speak up real loud, Robin.
Robin Yateman, the membership coordinator. If you have any questions, my email address is members@womenwednesdays.com. And my other job is working at Abrams magazine and Home & Yard magazine. It's a pretty big publication in Tallahassee to reach a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for membership, my goal is to get the membership list cleaned up online so everybody looks good, and stay in contact with everybody and just be a liaison to Barbara if you need it.
Yeah, excellent. And so then we also have Jackie right here. So Jackie, there's Jackie.
Hi. My name is Jackie Brown, and I help with the Tech Squad. So if you have a question about how to use Google Drive or some kind of social media question, anything that's frustrating you with your computer, put it online. There's a page on our website for the tech squad. You send in your request, and one of us will reach out to you and hopefully answer your questions, so we don't get frustrated by technology, because it's a tool. We all need it.
Right, right. And tell us about initial social media too.
So my business is Initial Social Media. I do social media marketing for small businesses and entrepreneurs, help you develop content. I can create all of it for you, manage it for you, answer all those pesky messages that you get all the time. But if you need anything, feel free to reach out to me at Jackie@initialsocialmedia.com. Thank you.
So Laura, I'm just going to mention, I'm going to be bringing up our guest in just a minute, but we're going to mention the Women Wednesdays model is designed. So we have women fulfilling roles to make sure Women Wednesdays can go forward and be a sustainable organization. But at the same time, it's highlighting, the other entrepreneurial efforts or workplace efforts that our leadership team is doing. So it dovetails together what they're doing for Women Wednesdays, but also what they're doing in their own businesses. So we love the platform. So is there anybody we've left out from this introduction at this moment? Oh, well, Gina, we have another, do we have pop around Gina? Gina is a new coordinator for a program we have called Women's Words. So Gina, you want to tell us very loudly about Women's Words and about yourself?
Sure. Women's Words is our blog for Women Wednesday. Any member or non-member can submit at any time. It does not have to be perfect. It can be any topic. We just want to hear your voice. We want to hear what you have to say. So you can reach out to us at words@womenwednesday.com by email.
That's right. And so Gina, what do you do when you're not doing Women's Words?
Oh, I am a Woman Speak Circle leader. And I also have a private Facebook group called Women Writing for Change. So I'm all about the words.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. All right. And who knows who else is going to come in here, but that's all great. So, but enough about us. Now it's time for us to really drill down and get to know our speaker and learn about this incredible book that she has written. So first and foremost, Laura, can you introduce yourself and just kind of give us a brief little introduction to you?
Sure. Well, it's so great to be here, and I just love your energy. I wish I was there in person. So next time I'm in town, I'll have to stop by. So I've been a serial entrepreneur for many years, but I didn't really start that way. I did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I come from a family that avoids risk at all costs. But I was really good at math and science growing up. So I went into more of the engineering track when I went off to college at Georgia Tech, where I was also on the varsity track and field team. And I studied aerospace engineering. So it's really good for all the rocket science jokes, because every time I go to a meeting, somebody says it's not rocket science. I'm like, that's okay. We got that covered. But when I got into engineering, I had a professor one time that told me I had an engineering mind and a liberal arts personality. And when you tell an 18-year-old that, it sounded like I needed medication. I was like, oh no, what do I do? But that was so insightful, because what I realized is that I love the problem solving side of engineering, but at heart, I'm a people person. And so I didn't want to sit in a lab the rest of my life calculating things. I wanted to work with people. So coming out of college, I worked in Japan for a while with the Defense Department. And then I decided to go off to business school. And when I came out of business school, I helped other people start and scale their companies. And I was really good at it. So Stacey and I joke that we were both reluctant entrepreneurs. We did not start out thinking we have to start a company, we have to be the boss. I was really good at helping other people scale their companies. And as Stacey often says, she really likes paychecks. And so we had the opportunity to meet in 2004 when we were both selected for the Leadership Atlanta class. And it brought together people from all different corners of the city and the community. Stacey at the time was the deputy attorney for the city of Atlanta, and I was running a real estate development company. And so we got to know one another. We were in the same study group. We got to kind of see how we approached problems that were bigger than us. And so at the conclusion of that program, I found out that I was pregnant with my son, which made, my mother and my mother-in-law were really excited. And that's really what prompted me to become an entrepreneur, was becoming a mom. Because when I became a mom, I knew that I'm a workaholic by nature, and I don't apologize for that. But if I'm doing something, I'm all in. And so I knew that when I had my son, I didn't want to put myself in a position to not be a great mom. So I decided I was going to start my own company. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I decided I was going to start my own company. At the same time, Stacey had decided she was going to run for the state House of Representatives. This was the first time she was going to run for an elected office. And so she decided to leave her role with the city to avoid any potential conflict and decided she was going to start a company. So I looked at her and I was like, well, you're the smartest person I've ever met. We should do something together. And she said, well, you're the smartest person I've ever met. We should do something together. And then we said, what should we do? So that's how we started our very first company called Insomnia, because neither one of us sleep a lot. We email each other at 2 a.m. and expect a response. So honestly, that's how we became entrepreneurs. Was we got together, we started our first company, which was a consulting firm, and then that led. Each business had a challenge, and it led to the next business.
Well, that's neat. Well, I want to bring that up, and I want to say, this is something you talked about in your book, Level Up. And I want to just start out by saying to you, and I'm not just saying this to butter you up. For me, having lived the entrepreneurial journey, the words and what you had to say truly resonated with me. It's like when you're reading something and doing something, it's like, yes, it just makes sense, and you're happy, to hear that and hear about someone else going through some of the same things that you've gone through. But I remember you also talking about being at Leadership Atlanta, and then you hear Stacey saying, I want to be president of the United States. And it's like you were thinking, well, I want to be president of the United States. And that you ran over and you met her. And then, what blossomed there was a strong friendship, but also, a realization that you were in sync in terms of business, but it's in sync except different. Because I know that's one of the things you talk about is having diversity, the way you think. Can you sort of talk about the kind of skill sets between you and Stacey and why diversity mattered? Why, building that team and that lifelong business partnership?
It's interesting when, as you mentioned, when Stacey and I met, we were actually in the middle of a race relations workshop. And the facilitator of that workshop is a gentleman named Al Vivian, C.T. Vivian's son. And he is masterful at he studies every participant before the event and figures out how to make you uncomfortable. So each person individually, he makes you really uncomfortable. And for me, he took away my voice. If you haven't figured out by now, I love to talk. And so he kept asking questions and I had my hand up and he wouldn't call on me and it was driving me nuts. But in hindsight, he said, I needed you to feel what it feels like to not have a voice. So I took away your voice. Stacey was the opposite. Stacey is naturally very introverted. And so he pushed her to share things that were very personal that she would never share. And when she shared that her secret dream was to be president of the United States, I thought, oh, I have never heard another woman say that in public. But I used to say that as a little girl. And so true to the differences, me being the extrovert, I accosted her at the buffet line at lunch. And I know what she was thinking is, who is this over-caffeinated woman and why is she talking to me? But what was interesting, so from the very beginning, we knew that we were different. We come from very different backgrounds. We come from very different ideologies. But what was interesting was being in this program, we got to see each other approach big societal problems like education and justice. And it was interesting because we developed a respect for each other's curiosity and each other's intent to the point where we don't ever judge each other. We assume good intent. And very often we want the same outcome, but how we would go about getting there is very different. And you know what? That's okay. Not only is it okay, it's awesome because we benefit from this kind of 365-degree view. But I think what's most interesting, Stacey and I have a business partnership that has now lasted almost 17 years and not all good times. Like it's easy to have a good partnership when everything goes well. but we've had businesses fail and we've stayed partners through bad times. And there were times when we were happy with each other, not happy with each other. But I think what is most interesting is we wouldn't question one another's character. What we learned early on is the diversity that matters is not a diversity of skill set, it's a diversity of mindset. The fact that we can approach problems differently without judgment, we can respect each other's area of expertise and not try to be one another. And we're close enough, but far enough that we maintain our diversity of thought. And what I mean by that is, I have people all the time that come up and say, I'm going to start a business with my best friend. And I'm like, ooh, hope you don't want to keep that best friend. With Stacey and I, we're close enough, but we still have our own individual space. We don't live next door to each other. We don't go to the same church. We don't have children in school together. And the benefit of that is that we have our own space to be authentically who we are and to maintain our individuality, but to bring those diverse thoughts together in a positive as opposed to a negative. So I really do think, when you want to find a partner, it needs to be someone you know well enough to trust inherently. I mean, we would protect each other from anything, but at the same time, you're not so close that you're on top of each other 24/7, in which case you lose that diversity of thought.
So like, did you ever think about your skill sets and what Stacey's skill sets were? It's funny, like, was it something that just clicked? Like sometimes I think when you're looking for a mate in life, it's almost like you have a little antenna on your head, and unknowingly you gravitate to someone that's strong in your weak areas.
Yeah.
So did your little antenna help you connect with Stacey?
It's funny when I attacked her at the buffet line, after I stopped talking, she stepped back and she said, wait a minute, I know you. And it turns out that a year prior, I had facilitated a strategy session for a nonprofit that she chaired the board of. And she said, I remember sitting there watching you and I was intrigued by your energy, but she's like, I kept taking notes because the way you thought about things was so intriguing to me because it was different. And I think what clicked from our antennas is Stacey and I are both insatiably curious. I love things that I don't know a lot about. Like if you introduce something to me and it's a problem I've never thought of, I'll think about it for the rest of the day. So I love being around people that are smarter than me, and I love being around people that know things I don't know. And I think what we had in common is that constant zest for learning, but also we are both okay not being the smartest person in the room. And I think, a lot of people look at us and they're like, wow, like there's two alpha women. Like, how does that work? But you know what? It works great because in order to be a good leader, you have to be okay with not always leading. And Stacey and I know when we go into certain situations, whether her skill set needs to lead or my skill set needs to lead. But I don't have to try to be her, and she doesn't have to try to be me. And I think it's that sort of mutual respect for our differences. But I will also tell you, one of the biggest mistakes we made, and I know we talk about it in the book, we built together a team where we brought in a couple of other women that on paper, we were the dream team. I mean, Stacey had the law background and this other woman had a background in marketing. And then we had the finance person. I mean, we had everything covered. But what we failed to do was to make sure that those other people aligned with us from a mindset perspective. And so we learned very quickly that you have to prioritize mindsets over skill sets.
Well, that's neat. And I know you were talking about with insomnia, like going back to that. And then you talked about, I think you were going to a lunch one day and you had the baby and water and formula and all that sort of stuff. Because I think
I was a mess.
Yeah. Well, but you say, you talk about what you notice, because like for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's about solving a problem or filling a void. And I think for you on that particular day, here you are, you and Stacey are successful with insomnia consulting, but something sort of happens that makes you think, here's a problem we need to solve. So you want to tell us about that?
Well, and I think
I'm
that's
all ears. I'm all ears because I'm currently in that space of
oh,
Well, you're going to love us
and the
tomorrow.
there you
formula
go.
and the nursing and the baby. And
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, and I think, Barbara, your question is so important because so many people come to me and say, I want to start a business. I have a great idea for a product. And I always caution people, if you have an idea in search of a problem, it's probably not going to scale or be sustainable. You have to start with the problem. Your passion needs to be in solving the problem, not in what the product is. So if your passion is in your very cool product that you developed, what happens is you never listen and you never improve. Like if I were to say, look at this cup I designed, and somebody said, oh, you could make that better, my brain is immediately going to be like, I'm sorry, did you not see my great cup? But if your passion is in the problem and solving the problem, you're all ears on how to make it better. So your question was very well phrased, which is, what problem drove you to your business? And so when we had insomnia, I had my son, and yes, I showed up to every meeting with stains on something and the child in the carrier and spilling things all over my car. And I walked into a meeting one day and I was just exasperated. I was like, I have stuff all over me. Somebody has got to make a spill-proof bottled water for kids. And we went on with our meeting. And then Stacey at the end of the meeting was like, what did you mean by the spill-proof bottled water? And I said, there's juice boxes, which I don't know who designed those, but it was not a woman. I can tell you that, because nobody would design a straw that when you grab it, shoots you right in the face. Who would design that? Or sugary drinks. And we all know what happens when you give a child sugary drinks. 5 o'clock comes along and your day goes, haywire. And so Stacey was like, what do you mean by a spill-proof bottled water? So I kind of shared what my idea was, and she was like, why don't we do it? Now, Stacey and I knew nothing about the bottled water industry. We knew how to spell water. That was about it. And so we called, my husband had worked at Coca-Cola for 26 years. So I called him and I said, I want to meet the head of Dasani because I have a packaging idea for you. And 2 weeks later, Stacey and I were like, where's our meeting? And he said, you don't just march into the head of Dasani. And I was like, well, you should. I mean, come on, people, like we got places to go. And so instead he said, well, you should meet this guy who recently retired. He helped build the water business. So Stacey and I went and met with him. Again, we had our notebook, we had a pen, and we had a lot of questions. And I think the beautiful thing is when you have an idea that is not in your area of expertise, you don't have anything but stupid questions to ask. And they're the best. So I think sometimes we limit ourselves to thinking, okay, I'm an aerospace engineer, so all of my ideas must be in aerospace engineering. That is not true. If you experience a problem or see someone else experience a problem, that's where you want to have your expertise, is in the problem, not necessarily the solution. You can hire people to help you with the solution. So we came up with the idea for this spill-proof bottled water. We walked around stores and looked at names and labels and colors and what we could do to be different. We realized that most baby products were very medicinal in their name, like Similac and Enfamil. That does not make you want to be emotionally attached to it, but you trust it. And then when your child gets to be a toddler, it's like primary colors and cartoon characters gone awry. And so we came up with Nourish, which was a very clear, clean bottle, a name that people could trust, but that was playful. And we didn't know where to start. And so we were having lunch with some girlfriends and they were like, well, how much do you need to get the molds made? And we came up with the number and we kind of self-cobbled it together with a bunch of friends and launched the business. We went out and tried to raise venture capital. And quite frankly, everybody looked at us. We were a woman, a minority woman, and we weren't doing high-tech software. So they were like, nope, doesn't work for us. Which is my other big pet peeve is if we're going to be inclusive about entrepreneurship, we need to be inclusive of all types of businesses, not just the ones that look Shark Tank sexy. So we launched Nourish, and that just came out of a problem we had. We'd never been in the industry. We scrapped and scraped. And after about a year, we got our first big order from Whole Foods. Yay! And that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I see the model behind you. I want people to just make
Oh,
sense of that.
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
I have a question for you, Laura. At any point, because that's cool and it's fun because I've seen that, so that's really fun for me. But you're talking a lot about mindset, and I'm just thinking like, wow, the mindset that you have to say, here's a problem, I have the capability to solve it. Here's a problem, I don't know anything. I'm not afraid to ask the questions, the stupid questions, as you said. What could you say to the person who's maybe averse to that step? They're like, man, I would love to ask the questions that maybe don't make sense because I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm a little afraid. Or I see the problem, but how can little old me fix that huge problem? Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, and I would say that was Stacey and I. We didn't know we could solve it. We just thought, wow, children have no access to clean water that's easy for them to handle. And why not us? Why somebody else? And the thing that I constantly remind people is all of the best ideas come from the demand side of a problem, not the supply side. So I'll give you an example. Everybody know like the GoPro cameras that you put on your helmet. Wouldn't you think that was designed by a video expert? It wasn't. The idea came from a surfer who couldn't film what he was doing because there was no way to hold the camera and surf. And, likewise, you look at something like Uber and say, well, surely someone who owned a taxi company could have come up with that, but they didn't. It came up with somebody that had that need. So I really think the greatest entrepreneurs come from the need side of the equation, not the supply side. With our current company Now Account, it's a fintech company, and people look at Stacey and I and they're like, neither one of you are bankers. No, a banker would never have come up with this because they see the world the way it's always been. And when you're new to something, you don't know what you don't know. So you just start asking questions. And, I'll never forget when we started Nourish, we were going in to pitch the parody shops, the newsstands at the airports. And remember, we're in Atlanta. We're like in the shadows of the Coca-Cola building, right? And so we were showing our presentation to a few folks and they were like, you really need to polish this up to look more like a Coca-Cola. And I sort of laughed, like, who's that gonna fool? Like, me pretending to be Coca-Cola? Like, it's Stacey and I and a couple of contractors. If we pretend to be something we're not, that is not going to fool you for very long. So instead we went in, and instead of being apologetic for what we didn't know, we actually changed our mindset and said, wait, what we don't know is a positive because you know too much. And so we came in with all of these great questions, and here's the mom's perspective and here's the customer's perspective. And, the reality is most of those big companies are not that in touch with their customers. So not only did they embrace the idea, but when we were just honest about all the things we didn't know, they offered to help. It's amazing. If you tell people, I really don't know the answer to that yet, but I would love for you to help me, they're never going to say no. They just jump right in. And so we ended up, you would laugh, we had this meeting, and the meeting was be the bottle. Like, we knew nothing. And so we brought together the guy who made the labels, the filler, the person who made the sippy tops, and we put them all in a room. And we said, okay, walk us through the process from the minute every part of this thing gets made until it's actually filled, packaged, and shipped. What's going to happen? And I have to tell you, it was an entire room of men. And at one point, they all started laughing because they said they'd never been in a meeting where the word nipple was said so much. But they also said they had all been in the industry for 40 years and nobody had ever brought them together. And we were like, why? Why would we not bring you together? Because it's interesting. There was something that the filler identified. He's like, well, you need a ridge on the neck because otherwise my equipment can't pick it up. Well, the guy who makes the bottles didn't know that. I didn't know that's what the ridge was for. And so having them all in a room saved us so much money because we fixed things before we ever spent the money to make the molds. And that's like an inherently female approach, right? It was very collaborative. It's get everybody in a room and we're going to ask all the dumb questions and you guys are going to answer them for us.
And I was going to say it's very efficient as well.
Very efficient.
During our trades work launch last week, there was a lot of mention about the female mindset and how it is such an asset in the skilled trades. And you're saying the same thing this week, is that it's just the way we think. A lot of times I think we've been made to think that we have to do it more this way or work, not using what is innate to us as as an advantage, leveraging that. And
I think the reason our minds are very efficient is what you said earlier. You're juggling a child and work. I don't know about you, but the minute I became a mom, I became a better CEO because I all of a sudden had very clear priorities and no patience for wasting time because I had way too much to get done. So I do think that our brains are wired for this sort of efficiency of parallel processing in a way that if you can get everybody together, like to us, that just made the picture make sense.
Excellent. So I know Chrissy is engaging with our online community, and I also want to reach out to the more and more women that are showing up in the room with us. And I want to reach out and say, do any of you have any questions? And throughout our time here, if you have any questions, just pipe up and ask.
Jump right in.
Does Mama have any questions that they want to ask? Okay, but if you do, you just let us know. All right.
I do want to share a comment from Stacey, who's joining us today. Hey, Stacey. And she says mindsets over skill sets is something that resonates with her. So that was a great key point there.
And it's a really hard thing to vet that in an interview. So the one thing I know, one of our subchapters says hire patience and hire patiently, meaning all too often we wait until we're in a panic and we need help. And then we just grab the first person who presents themselves and answers the questions right. And the problem is when you do that, you end up hiring people that remind you of yourself. And so you end up losing that diversity. It takes time to curate diversity in your company. And it's not about just hiring people who look and talk differently than you. It's making sure that you maintain that diversity. Because I've been in companies before where they're like, oh, look at all the diverse people we hired. But then within weeks, they teach you how to think. I'm like, don't do that. Like, don't teach everybody to think the same way because now you just got rid of all the diversity you spent all this time to hire. So, definitely hire patiently because you want the right person, not the right now person. It's much harder to fix it if you make a mistake, and really focus on, is their mindset when faced with a challenge, how do they overcome it? When they're under stress, how do they see opportunities instead of just challenges? That stuff matters more than exactly what they do. I can teach you to do just about anything I need you to do. We're not doing heart surgery here. But I can't teach you how to think. And I can't teach you how to not freak out when things go wrong, because things will go wrong just about every day.
Right. And I think that's great advice. And it really does, like you said, time. It does take the test of time to get to know people. And like you say, mindset, it's a good way to look at it. You have to make sure you're in sync. And like you say, you can really teach people, but you have to have, a similar mindset, but diversity of thought. So I think that's really great. So I wanted to ask you too about, you Nourish is actually, that business was really sort of booming. And I know, some things happened, but I wonder if you can kind of take us through the evolution, because ultimately your work with Nourish is going to lead you in another direction. You're going to identify another problem that really needs solving. So can you kind of walk through, what happened with Nourish and, what were some of the challenges, but then how it led you to the next step?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, if you've ever developed a product, this is like your child, right? Like, the amount of time and effort and heart and passion that goes into making something, it really is like a child, and you're extremely protective of it. So when we launched Nourish, we had kind of instant success. We were in all the baby magazines. Whole Foods picked us up. We were in parody shops in the airports. All the mom blogs were, lighting up about Nourish. And so on paper, we were doing great, right? I mean, like everybody loved the product, and the unit economics were such that we could ship product and get paid and make money and make more product. And I still remember the day that we got the first big order from Whole Foods. I called Stacey. I was so excited. I was on my way to the office. I had just dropped my child off at preschool. And I came running in and I was like, oh my gosh, we got the order and we're ready to ship. And this was the first time that it wasn't cases. It was truckloads. Cases we knew how to do. That meant Brittany every day left our office with a bunch of FedEx and UPS packages and dropped them off. But truckloads was having to have a shipper that was going to pick them up from the loading dock. And it was amazing. Our filler was a little overwhelmed. So Stacey and I actually went down there. I had rain boots on because I was in the water filling room and we were like capping bottles as fast as we could. Almost every time we had a big aha, yay, something went wrong. So, the first time we got a big order and we started running the bottles on the high speed line, the labels weren't sticking in a way that we liked. They had little air bubbles. And so we called the filler and they were very defensive. They were like, well, it's this problem and this problem. And I was like, time out. I don't care where the problem is. I want to know what the solution is. And it was funny because his response was, oh my gosh, I've never worked with anybody who focused more on the solution than on finding blame for who was to fault. And so, our team came together, we solved the problem, but we had to ship those bottles in a couple days. So Stacey and I were literally at my dining room table, like hand applying labels on thousands of bottles, saying to ourselves, we will look back fondly on this day at some point. But you know what? That failure of the label caused us to realize something. The labels were too big because they were shaped like the whole bottle. And if you see this, there's only print on this little piece, so there's no reason to have a big label. It can just be a little strip. We would have never discovered that if we hadn't had the failure and had to do it by hand. So every time something goes wrong, take the energy you would have spent trying to figure out whose fault it was, and instead focus on what did I learn and what do I do better now? So as a result, we actually cut cost out of the bottle because of that failure. So then our next big failure came when we got the first order from Whole Foods, which doesn't sound like a failure. It sounds like a huge success, and it was. And we shipped the truckload. And Whole Foods was the first time that our customer didn't pay us with a credit card, because when we used to ship cases, all of our customers gave us credit cards. Whole Foods wanted net 30 terms. Now, I have an MBA from Harvard. I should know what that means. And I do know what that means. It means that I'm going to give you the product and you're going to pay me in 30 days. I didn't love the idea of waiting 30 days to get paid, but everybody said it's the cost of doing business. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, I must have been sick one day in finance class when we talked about this, because I don't remember talking about that. We talked a lot about venture capital, but not about that. And so I went to my suppliers and said, look, I'm not going to get paid for 30 days. I can't pay you till I get paid because this is a truckload of product with a lot of zeros on it. So will you give me 45 or 60 days? And they should have said no because we had no balance sheet. We were like two ladies with an idea and some molds we'd cobbled together. But they said yes because they loved our product. The 30th day came and a check did not arrive. I don't know what it is about the U.S. Postal Service because they can easily find my mailbox with bills, but for whatever reason, the check is always in the mail, right? Even though you and I can like hold our phones up and move money instantly, the check is still always in the mail. And so the 45th day came and a check still didn't arrive. Meanwhile, I have more orders coming in, which is supposed to be a good thing because it's flying off the shelf of Whole Foods. The problem is I wasn't getting paid. I couldn't make the next order, but I had to ship it in a certain window. So I remember that day where I was not cheering. I dropped my son at daycare. I put my head on the steering wheel and I cried because we literally could not service the next Whole Foods order. And if you say no, you don't get to ship again. And I called Stacey. I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Like, we haven't gotten paid for the first order, but we've got all these other orders. And we called our supplier and they said, well, you just have a working capital issue. Everybody has that. you should go get a line of credit, or go get a loan at your bank, or try factoring. And he kept talking, but Stacey and I were like, whoa, back up. What do you mean everybody has this problem? And he said, oh yeah, everybody has a working capital problem. You should just go borrow money. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I don't want to borrow money, right? Why should I borrow money and sign personal guarantees and put everything at risk because Whole Foods is borrowing my money for free for 60 days, right? Like that. If you walk out of a store without paying, that's called stealing. And yet in the business to business world, you ship product and nobody ever pays you on time. And so Stacey and I went down to the bank. As you can imagine, nobody was lining up to make a loan to two people that look like us. And they wanted personal guarantees. You know what? Not putting my house at risk. And Stacey was not going to put at risk the fact that she cares for her parents. And so we talked to all these other like financy type folks, and they were all these very stoic bankers that talked at us, never with us. You know, they were like, you should do this. And I'm like, okay, when's the last time you ran a small business while you're telling me what I should be doing? Because last time I checked, you've worked at a bank your whole life. You don't know what it means to almost not make payroll. And so Stacey and I were having lunch one day, and we were like, wait a minute. This restaurant never waits to get paid. That is so unfair. And the reason restaurants don't wait to get paid is because we all pay with credit cards, right? When you swipe your Visa, they get paid that day, and it's not a loan. It's not financing anything. They just get paid immediately, and then you pay your Visa bill whenever you're going to pay your Visa bill. If you don't pay your Visa bill, that does not go back to the restaurant, right? And so I called Whole Foods and I was like, out of curiosity, why don't you pay us with a credit card? That would solve everything. And they said, no, because if we pay you with a card, we now owe the bank. But if we don't pay your net 30 invoice on the 30th day, nothing happens. So then Stacey and I were like, wait a minute. We're the free bank and we stink at it. So how are we going to solve this? And I think that's the other thing Stacey and I have always had in common is we could have just solved our own problem. But instead we were like, wait, if everybody has this problem, then we have a responsibility to not only solve it for us, but to solve it for everybody that comes behind us. And so we started a company called Now Account, which is essentially the first ever payment system when you deliver your good or service to another business or government and they don't want to pay you up front with a credit card, you just put it on your Now Account, you get paid immediately minus a 3% fee. So it feels like they gave you a Visa, even though they didn't give you a Visa. And that's how we ended up in finance.
Yeah, and I think that's brilliant. But let's talk about the implication, because what you're saying, this problem that you've identified, which you lived through Nourish, did Nourish continue on, or did that stop you in your tracks?
You know, it didn't stop us in our tracks. Nourish did not. Nourish sort of held on for a while, but it was a slow and painful death. You know, we came up with this idea, but it took years to build Now Account, right? Like we started putting all the pieces in place, but it wasn't overnight. In the meantime, we had to turn down orders because we couldn't get paid faster. And so we kept both businesses going. If you went to our first office, there was a door with the Nourish logo, and then there's a door with the Now Account logo. And we were still shipping water when we could, and hoping every day that somebody showed up with a solution faster than what we were building with Now Account. And I'll tell you, it was one day where one of my business associates said, why are you still playing with this bottled water thing when you could change the entire US economy for small businesses? And I rarely don't have an answer. I can always make one up, but I didn't have one, right? I was like, but I couldn't let this go, right? It was my child. Like I couldn't just give it up. And so I held on to it. Like Stacey and I tried to keep both going until somebody finally said, you have such an opportunity to help other people with Now Account. Maybe you should just put Nourish off to the side. So we did shut Nourish down. It was a painful day. But my husband points out that Nourish's role in my life was to get us to Now Account.
So let me just ask you this. Had Now Account existed, you just say you invented it and you made it happen, but had it existed when you were doing Nourish, that might have made all the
It would have
difference.
changed everything.
Would have
Yeah.
changed
If we had Now Account, every time we shipped product to Whole Foods or Kroger or parody shops, we would have gotten paid in 2 days. That would have changed everything because we would have had all of our own cash that we could have invested back in the business. We could have taken on larger orders knowing that we'd get paid immediately, and we would have had no debt on our balance sheet. And think about that. You would have this balance sheet with all this cash, no accounts receivable, and no debt. We would have been able to then go into the bank and finance the equipment that we needed to automate our processes. There were so many things that we needed to invest in, but we didn't have the cash. And the reason we didn't have the cash is because Whole Foods had our cash. They're just holding it for free.
Right, and I see Chrissy shaking her head. Chrissy is a product-based business. Why don't you quickly tell about what you do, Chrissy? But I know that this is resonating for Chrissy. I can see it in her face.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it's so inspiring to hear your story and how you've gotten to where you are now. And I feel, as a serial entrepreneur myself, that is a similar, course of action to developing great ideas and great products. And so my business, Kitschy Wearable Art, I developed the technology basically with resin, where we collaborate with artists, put their art in wearable art. And that was kind of like where we started. And now it's just kind of taken a life of its own with different partnerships and all of that. And so it's always very interesting to see where you can take one idea.
Yeah,
And
and
I think that's so important because honestly, when we started Now Account, we were just trying to solve our problem. What we've now learned after serving thousands of small business owners is some of our largest customers are service-based businesses, because what they realize is their largest asset is people, and people need to be paid every 2 weeks. Your employees don't like to be paid net 30. And so the only way you can grow a service business is to hire more people. And if you can get paid in a couple of days, it becomes your greatest sales tool. So every day I am amazed at how creative our clients are to take what I designed for one use and apply it to so many other uses.
yeah. So can you kind of speak to that journey for Now Account? Can you, because I mean that everything you've already done is already so amazing, and then now this is just taking it to an incredible level with venture capital, fintech, all that sort of stuff. Can you kind of tell us about that journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. We built the business plan. We put together kind of the financial projections of how we thought it would work. But remember, Stacey and I weren't experts on the back end of how to manage risk and all of that stuff. So we had a third partner that had been in that space for a while. He came in and kind of, took over the back of house piece to help us do that. But it was interesting because every day we were now in front of bankers, venture capitalists, investors, and, to the question that was brought up earlier, like initially we had a little bit of a imposter syndrome, right? We're walking in, we're not finance experts, but we're surrounded by a room of finance experts. And I'll tell you one of the most interesting things. Some of the banks we would talk to, the initial response is, oh, we know what you're doing, right? It's just really factoring. You've just changed a little bit. And they never got there. They never really figured it out. But the banks that we talked to where the initial response was, I don't really understand what you're doing, but I'm willing to think through it with you, they all became our best partners. And it wasn't until years later we looked back and said, what was different about the banks that figured it out and the ones that didn't? The ones that figured it out all had a female in their senior leadership team. And it was typically the female that was the one that said, I don't understand it, but I'm willing to listen. Whereas a lot of the men were like, oh no, I know what you're doing. I had a guy one time, I walked in and I hadn't even said one sentence. And he was like, well, I already understand what you do. It's like, really? Wow, that's pretty amazing. Why don't you tell me? So I think, again, when you walk into a room where everyone else is sort of an expert, remind yourself They may be an expert in the way it's always been done, but they're not an expert in the way it could be done tomorrow if you innovate, right? You're on a level playing field and you're actually ahead because you're the one that identified the problem. So, Stacey and I, we had to work with different government programs. We had to work with banks. We had to work with insurance companies. I mean, we were in an element that neither one of us had ever been in. But I think that's why, when we talk to our clients, part of what they appreciate is they're like, you're not a banker that's telling us what to do. You're one of us. It was designed by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And so, we went through a period of really fast growth on the Now account side. And we started growing. And then we actually, shocking, had a problem. We had a client steal from us. And it was an awful, awful day. It couldn't have happened at a worse time. Like, all of our debt facilities were maturing. So we didn't have time to fix it. And I still remember my CFO, Amelia, came to me and said, I think we have a problem. And I was like, well, do we know? Like, can we size it? And she was like, not yet, but I think there's a problem. And it's interesting because one of our partners was like, well, let's just not tell anybody. Let's just figure it out. And I was like, no, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and I'm flying to San Francisco to meet with my private equity group. And I had no clue what I was going to say. I mean, that was the longest flight of my life. And I walked into this big boardroom and the guy was sitting like at the other end of the table. And I said, I think we have a problem. I don't know how big it is yet. I don't know if it's isolated or systemic. And if I'm part of the problem and you want me to give you the keys and go out the door, I will. But I can also tell you I will not rest till I fix it. And he looked at me and he was like, you know what? Let's figure it out. And so he jumped in. We figured out that it wasn't systemic. It was an isolated bad person. We figured out how to change the process so that we could identify that in the future. And you know what he did? He invested more money. And he said, you are a better investment for me today than you were when I met you 4 years ago, because you know what can go wrong now. You're not going to do that again. But you know what? He said, the reason I'm going to invest more with you is you came on that plane before you even knew if there was a problem. And, we learned that in kindergarten, right? Say, I'm sorry. Tell people what the problem is. And if we had done what others wanted to do, which was not tell anybody and see if we could fix it, that is the worst way to solve a problem, because it ain't going away. It's just going to get bigger. And so my investors have been the best supporters through our darkest days because we were honest.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like, and as we've gone through this conversation, it sounds like honesty and authenticity have always worked in your favor, and you've been consistent. You and Stacey have been consistent in that, especially in an environment where a lot of times you were saying, they said, hey, don't talk about it. Just, there's a lot of fake it till you make it out there. But you're telling us the opposite of that. And I guess my follow-up question to this is, I've heard other entrepreneurs, whether on podcasts or reading books, I've heard them talk a lot about who they were as a child or who they were as a teenager and how that grew into who they are now. How much of who you are now would say is a product of who you've always been or who you've become? Whether through experience or, like you said, motherhood changed some things for you. I understand that. So yeah, how much of who you are now and being this kind of champion of honesty and authenticity in business is a result of who you've been or who you've become?
Well, I think the honesty part is definitely who I've been, and largely because my father was a federal investigator. So there was no gray in our house. There was right and there was wrong. and you did not want to be on the wrong side because my sister and I used to laugh. My father never raised his voice, but he could make you confess anything by just looking at you, right? Like, I mean, my sister and I got away with nothing. So I think, we were raised in a world where honesty was painful, but it was way less painful than trying to, pretend something didn't happen. And so I think that was in my DNA. Stacey Stacey's father was a shipbuilder, her mother was a librarian, and they both went back to divinity school and became ministers. And so I think Stacey certainly also came from a family where truth and honesty were always the way to go. That's probably why our antennas connected, when we first met, is that we were both very honest and humble and, sort of willing to put ourselves out there. I think you do change over time. I mean, I hope we do, because otherwise all these life experiences, don't add value. But, for sure, becoming a mother, having employees totally changed me. I mean, when Stacey and I first had Insomnia, it was just the two of us. That was easy. We had clients, they paid us, we paid ourselves. It was great. The minute you have employees that rely on you, that is one of the greatest responsibilities. But I mean, I'll tell you, when I've had things go wrong, like when we had this theft with Now account, and there was a chance that we weren't going to make it, I couldn't sleep at night, not because of me, but I kept thinking of the faces of all my employees that I would be letting down, and failure wasn't an option. Like, I couldn't let them down. And so, that changed me. But I do think, I've worked in businesses for egotistical people who, quite frankly, treat their employees like crap. They yell at people. And I've had people say, well, to be successful, you have to be like that. No, you don't. I mean, come on. I just think there's so many urban myths about entrepreneurship that are unfortunate. One is that you have to love risk, right? There's this myth that if you're an entrepreneur, you have to love risk. You live in your garage, you eat macaroni and cheese. And the reason that's so unfortunate is that it discourages many would-be amazing entrepreneurs, largely women and people of color, who don't have the choice to live in their garage and eat macaroni and cheese because they have responsibilities in life. And so I think that's unfortunate. We have to dispel these myths. Like, Stacey and I don't love risk, but we can take it and look at it from all sides and figure out what parts we can control. I think the other myth is that you have to give up your life to be an entrepreneur. And that drives me nuts when there's this myth that, venture capitalists propagate that says, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be all in and you have to work 24/7 and ignore your family. You know what? If you're willing to do that, I wouldn't invest in you because you don't make wise choices. Why would you ever prioritize something over your child or your spouse? You wouldn't do that. And so we can't expect our employees to do that. We can't expect our investors to want us to do that. And I think you just, everyone knows that's a false statement, but we all play the game. And it's propagated by people who did make bad choices and now they want company. So we have to stop it.
Yeah, definitely. And if I could just ask, one of the things you also talk in the book about is supplier diversity. And a lot of people don't know that term or why it matters, but having an understanding of supplier diversity really played a role in, NowCore. And can you kind of, say why that would matter? That
Sure.
Everybody have a little bit of understanding about supplier diversity.
So the reason I think supplier diversity is so important is when you think about this idea that we can have a more diverse workforce and a more diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem. The reason we want to do that is that entrepreneurship is the way to move wealth, right? I mean, that's how you create generational wealth. And I think a lot of companies, when they talk about diversity, they talk about diversity of their employee base, which is very important, right? To have a diverse set of employees. But if you want to make a real difference, you also have to have a diversity of who you buy stuff from, because that's where the money really goes. And I was speaking to the Georgia Chamber the other day, and it's, the CEOs of all the Fortune 50 companies. And I said, look, you guys are all making very public promises about wanting to help women and minorities. And I think that's great. And I think it's sincere. But if you really want to help people, buy stuff from them, right? Instead of allocating little bits of dollars into like a PR fund that you're just going to get credit for, but it's not really going to move the needle, buy stuff from them. That's what makes a business sustainable. So supplier diversity to me is not only procuring goods and services from other, underrepresented businesses, but I think we have to take supplier diversity a step further and call it supplier development, because it's not enough to just buy something from a small, diverse firm. You have to help them build the capabilities to grow with you. It's not a one-time thing, right? It's not like, oh, I ordered some things from them, so check the box, I have supplier diversity. That's not okay. You have to commit to buying recurring and larger amounts of goods and services from businesses that are diverse in their ownership and diverse in their employee base.
That's great. And I think, for people to understand, most big corporations, which might seem out of reach, I mean, just about all of them, or many of them, have supplier diversity programs.
Right.
And that might be your foothold. That might be your entry.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, most large companies have a bogey they're trying to hit. They're trying to hit 20% of every dollar goes to small and diverse businesses, or 25%, or whatever the percentage is. Most of them are nowhere close. There's even an organization called the $1 Billion Roundtable, which is an exclusive group of multinational corporations who spend at least $1 billion a year with minority and women-owned businesses. There's only like 28 of them. It's a very small group. And even large companies you would think are there that aspire to get there are struggling. And so one of the things we're actually working on, and it's in the last chapter of the book, is the Now Network. And it's sort of, we're launching it, like we've got a landing page now, but we're launching it for real in the next couple of months. And what happened during the pandemic is we had all these clients calling us saying, oh my gosh, because you're getting me paid immediately, I've grown my business 3x. Now I need a partner to do this. I need more trucks. I need more money. I need this. And so I have very much spent the last 2 years like the old 1960s telephone operator. Like, you want to meet her? I'll connect you. I just finished a project for Nestle. I'd love to work for Coca-Cola. Well, I know the head of supplier diversity at Coca-Cola. Let me connect you. And what we realized at the same time is that the head of supplier diversity at Coca-Cola was calling us saying, I really want to buy more from Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, but I have trouble finding them, which at first I sort of said, really? But it's actually valid, and I'll tell you why. I have trouble finding them, and I have an even harder time vetting them. And here's the problem. If you're the head of procurement at Coca-Cola, you can go get a database from NMSDC of all the minority-owned businesses. How in the world do you compare them? How do you know which marketing firm can do this project versus this project? You don't have a staff that can vet them. And so they were coming to us saying, is there any way you can help us vet these businesses? Because you see their invoices. And so the Now Network is going to do exactly that. We're going to take minority and women-owned businesses. We're going to match them up with large customers that we know are procuring goods and services. And then we're going to help them check all of the boxes to qualify to serve those businesses. Because we can go to Coca-Cola and say, I know she can deliver because I just saw her deliver to Nestle. So don't even think twice, order stuff from her. And so we're going to curate this sort of ecosystem around commerce. So because I believe when we talk about access to capital, we should really be talking about access to commerce, because the most important dollar you will ever have in your business is revenue. That's yours. It's not a loan that you owe somebody else. It's not equity that you owe somebody ownership. It's yours. You earned it. You own it. And so if I can get you more revenue that you can get paid immediately on, you can grow your business and not have to give up ownership in it.
Yeah, and you're, honestly, like what you're saying, so we have a bunch of ladies in the room with us here today, and we're building a collaborative community of women who are helping each other succeed. And I mean, it's a good model, isn't it? Because that's kind of what you're saying. You're building a collaborative community of like B2B businesses, that are in it together, that are there to help each other succeed. And it's, like the sort of rising tide kind of thing.
Well, we'll have to connect Women Wednesdays into the Now Network, because what we want to do, in addition to the small businesses and the large procurement folks, we want to bring in, experts that can bring together content and education and collaboration. And you guys already do that well. So we'll just have to bring you in.
We do, and it's a game changer. It really is. I mean, I'm just a huge believer in the power of collaboration. And, I'm thinking for you, everything you've done has been a step to the next thing, And so, you've written this book that we've been talking about, and I'm wondering what is the next stage? Is that what you're talking about, this network? What is the next stage for, what's going to come from this? Because this is going to lead to something too.
Yeah.
It already is.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, at the back of the book, there's a QR code that takes you to a website to join the Level Up movement. And what Stacey and I really believe is, small businesses have never had a voice. We're talked at, not with. And quite frankly, even when you look at programs like PPP, that wasn't designed by small businesses. It was designed by large corporate bureaucrats and government bureaucrats as a way to help business. But how do you know how to really help us if you haven't been one? And so we believe that if we can aggregate small business owners and collectively bring together this voice, we can change the way things work in the economy. Let's be honest, we're the engine of the economy. We're the ones creating the jobs. So I laugh every time I go to a small business conference. Think about what the room looks like. All the small business owners sit in the audience and listen to like the head of marketing from AT&T or the head of this. Why? It should be the opposite. Like, these big companies should be sitting in the audience listening to us, because we're the ones that are innovating. We're the ones that are figuring it out. So why are we listening to the head of marketing at a Fortune 50 company tell us how to do it? That's how it used to be done.
Right. And you have, I'm trying to find that statement. You talk about in someone's shoes. Let me see that, because I thought that was a neat quote. Get advice from people in your shoes, not those who sell shoes.
Right.
So that's kind of alluding to that, which is kind of true. Right. Someone who's been there and is doing
Yes.
that.
Well, I would bet every person on this call or in the room has had an experience where somebody talked to you condescendingly that's never, ever tried to do what you do. I'm like, when you sit there under the comfort of a paycheck and you talk condescending to me, I'm the one out there taking a risk to create jobs and create economic prosperity. You should be learning from me, not the other way around.
Right. That's great. And if I can, I think, who has the book now? Everybody's taking a picture of the QR code. So I signed up this morning, so my little emails, and we'll make sure that everybody else does. But it's just been wonderful. Again, I want to encourage everyone, please read this book. You really are going to, I don't know, my husband was asking, what did it mean to you? And it just honestly kind of made me feel okay. Because, honestly, I mean, it has been such a journey, and there's been a lot of challenges. There's been a lot of good things happening. But, I think I read this and thought, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm doing this journey. I'm learning along the way. And, sometimes you're having more impact and more progress than what you realize. So I also want you to know, I want to see how we can continue to collaborate and be a part of the Level Up movement. I want you to know that we're all on a mission to make Tallahassee a #1 city for women. But we are more than happy, once we make Tallahassee a #1 city, to help other cities and help the nation just be a top, incredible place for women in our country and even across the world. So
yeah, I love that. Let me know how I can help. One of the things I've been working with the president of Georgia Tech on this idea of inclusive entrepreneurship, because I do think that, the systems are not set up to encourage. In many cases, they unknowingly discourage women, minorities, and even different industries, right? Like, again, if you're not a high-tech startup, you're somehow a second-class citizen. Or if you didn't raise venture capital, you're a second-class citizen. That's crazy. I mean, I would venture to guess Mrs. Fields didn't think starting a cookie company was that bad of a thing, right? It's like created a lot of value. So we have to stop judging relative entrepreneurial value. The fact that you raise money does not mean you've created value. It just means you have a chance to lose more money. So I think we've got to change the narrative around, it's interesting when you think about like high tech venture backed, we call those entrepreneurs and startups. And then when you think about like the woman who owns the jewelry company, we call her a business owner. Why is that not an entrepreneur and a startup? So we've got to be careful about the words we use and stop, telling people they're better than another entrepreneur, because we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I'm curious, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, I'm curious if you have customers in Tallahassee with Now Account.
Oh, I'm sure we do. I'll have to go look.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because it just seems
clients all over the country. So
right, yeah, I'm sure you do too. But it just makes sense that it would be such an asset for small businesses to have this. So we definitely need to spread the word even further. So I want to see, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask that are here with us? Any brave souls? All right, we have a quiet little group here.
I do want to encourage everyone watching, please share this. This was a great conversation. I think it's going to continue in the comments. I think we may need a part 2. And I'll also say, if you've read the Level Up book already, let us know in the comments. If you're going to read it, let us know, because with enough response, we might have a little group that needs to read it together. So let us know if you are going to dive right in, as I will be doing, even if it's on Audible, so that I can listen to something other than nursery rhymes and
I will tell you, if you listen to the Audible, so Stacey and Heather and I narrate, you will hear my voice break because when we were writing the book, when you're telling your own story, you're kind of like, why would anybody find this interesting? But when I had to read it to narrate, I was going through all those emotions all over again. So there's a chapter where Stacey and I are having tea and she's telling me she's going to run for office. So I'm not going to see her very much anymore. And I know while I'm narrating, my voice cracks because I got sad all over again. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going through all these emotions all over again. So you definitely hear that.
You know what else I like about the book too? I like how you have the chapter, but then I love how at the end you have the level up lesson, which a level up lesson just goes back and recaps kind of, what you had just been telling us and the lessons the takeaway lessons from that. And, it's helpful,
ultimately on the website, we're going to collect. So throughout the book, you'll see we share other people's stories. It's not just about us. And those stories are so amazing to me. And we have so many more that didn't make it in the book. And so we want to collect more of these stories so that we can, continue on, make the book living, right? We can add more and more stories. And we're also working on like a young reader adaptation where we focus on businesses that young people have started. Not every college student wants to hear about what a 50-year-old woman's doing. But so yes, we'd love to hear everybody else's stories, what your favorite lessons are, and add to them, because those are just our lessons. You all have lessons of your own as well.
Yeah. And is there anything, as we're winding down here, is there anything that you want to share that you want fellow women to know that we didn't touch upon today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting because people ask us, like, why now? Why did we write the book now? And honestly, when we were approached by the idea, our first reaction was, we're too busy. Like, obviously, Stacey's busy running for governor right now, and I'm busy running the company. But it's interesting because I think as we're coming through the pandemic and hopefully into more of an endemic stage, on one hand, you see these statistics and more businesses are being started than ever. But at the same time, you see reports that we're in an entrepreneurship crisis. And I remember thinking, how can that be both? How can we be starting all these businesses and be in a crisis? And I think the challenge we're having is that a lot of people that are starting what looks like a business on paper, they're really starting a job for themselves. And if the vast majority of what looks like new businesses never scale to hire another employee, and it's all just a job, then when you're ready to retire, it's going to go away. And that's not good for our economy. We need these businesses to scale. We need to create jobs. We need to create economic prosperity. And so that's why we thought it was a great time to start this conversation and start sharing these lessons, because the vast majority of these companies are being started by women and minorities. Some people because they wanted to, and some people because they have to. They lost their job. That doesn't make you less of an entrepreneur. That might make you the best entrepreneur ever.
Yeah, and who are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs? Yeah, you're welcome. Well, excellent. Okay, any other questions from our panel here? What about you, Olivia?
Oh, no, I just like throughout the whole time you've been saying like everything that you've done has been a problem for you, but then it ultimately is helping like a lot of businesses like Nourish. It didn't work out, but it led to a way bigger the Now account, and that helps so many businesses. So I like how everything that you're doing isn't just helping you, but it's helping a lot of people. So
yeah, and it's the journey, the evolution of the journey, and you know what's on the other side and what can happen. So Lara, thank you so very much. I hope that we can be sister cities. I hope the women of Tallahassee can collaborate with the women of Atlanta, and that we can be a part of your journey too, because I very much, I know everybody, I can tell they really enjoyed our conversation today. You're going to have a lot of sales in Tallahassee. People read the book, and then we'll probably have a little book club and have a further discussion about it.
That'd be great.
So thank you so much for joining us. So I think we're pretty much out of time now. But Lara, I'd like to just remind our panel, please stay in. We have a virtual green room that we're going to go back to. We do want to attempt to take a group picture with you on the screen and with your book and everything. So everybody have a wonderful day. Let's just say though, stay tuned for next week for Women Wednesdays. We're going to have the Healing Arts Alliance on. They're going to talk about the benefits of holistic care, their organization, but how it's another tool in your tool chest for your own personal health to think about the holistic care that's available in our communities. And a lot of those holistic care businesses are women-owned businesses. And so it's just a great thing to know more about. So we'll be back next week with that. But again, thank you so much, Lara, and everybody get out there and get your level up book.